You could understand if many Russians and others who've survived the Gulag horrors of the old Soviet Empire would be doing their darndest these days to block those dark years out of their consciousness. So how must they feel now that a Soviet-era theme park, yes, you did hear me correctly, exists and is actually making money portraying what could only be called Stalinist kitsch? Don't believe me? Well, take a look at this report from Nick Lazaredes.
You will hear the authentic recording. The speech of Joseph Stalin, recorded on May 9th, 1945.
Товарищи, соотечественники и соотечественницы, наступил Великий День Победы над Германией.
At Grūtas Park, deep in the Lithuanian countryside, the darkest days of the Soviet occupation have been preserved for posterity, giving those who visit a privileged peek behind what was the Iron Curtain. Visitors have dubbed it Stalin World, although it could just as easily be called Lenin World. Both images on display in virtually every conceivable art form. Remarkably, a decade after the park was founded, amidst a storm of scepticism, it has become one of Lithuania's most popular tourist attractions. But its mere existence in a country which saw hundreds of thousands of its citizens dragged off to Soviet work camps in Siberia, the gulags, many never to return, remains a contentious and divisive issue within Lithuanian society.
Потому что сталинизм, как и гитлеризм, сделал столько бед народу, что его даже вспоминать неохота.
Что быстро забывается, тот легко повторяется. И вот мы созданием этого парка, мы постоянно людям хотим напоминать все это.
Russian tanks push around Vilna to completely circle the city and spearhead their drive into East Prussia. The siege is a bitter battle.
When the Red Army threw the Nazis out of Lithuania in 1944, the so-called liberators remained, and the country was quickly absorbed into the Soviet Union, which people forced to adhere to a new ideology. Those who opposed the strict Stalinist doctrine were forcibly exiled to the dreaded gulags.
The Soviet regime had its aim to raise a submissive and obedient Soviet man from his early childhood. For that purpose,
it's hardly surprising that the creator of this totalitarian-style Disneyland is also a little offbeat. Vilnius Malinauskas is a temperamental millionaire who made a fortune through exporting mushrooms and snails.
Теперь небольшое, 20 миллионов евро, как занимались грибами и ягодами, было 80-100 миллионов евро. Нам хватает теперь.
The summer cafe, which as its name implies, operates during the warmer part of the year, also provides guests the opportunity to try Soviet-era entrees.
Vilnius has gone to extraordinary lengths to offer a truly dour Soviet experience. The park's recreation of a communist-era cafeteria with its bland menu has proven popular with curious customers.
A lot of people ordered just these dishes.
87% населения сказали за то, что такой парк нужен для Литвы. Вот и весь вам ответ. Если этот был неинтересен парк, и все, люди не ходили сюда.
Certainly, Villemaus's massive mushroom fortune was enough to turn his vision of totalitarian tourism into reality. During much of the 1990s, he traversed Lithuania, buying up as many Soviet monuments and relics as he could lay his hands on. It was an astute investment. But for Lithuania's estimated 60 to 70,000 survivors of the gulags, creating a theme park from these icons of oppression is appallingly insensitive.
В свое время мы тут писали очень много документов и были против этого все, чтобы этот создать.
Gulag survivor Povilas Dursey unsuccessfully campaigned to stop the construction of the theme park.
Страшно. История, есть книги, прочитают в книге. А это уже агитация. А там уже, когда приезжает, это уже агитация. Советской власти агитация. Вот и все. Я против этого.
Povilas vividly remembers how his family's Siberian nightmare began when, without warning, Soviet troops arrived at their home in the dead of night.
Ну, военные окружили, и все собрали, всех собрали. Я был 9 лет, сестра была 7-летняя, а брат был 14 лет. Уже рассветало, пришел в комнату и сказали, что вы будете переселены, не высланы, а вы будете переселены из Литвы. Куда, не сказали. Из Литвы переселены. Ну, мать, известно, начала сразу кричать, плакать. Но мы успокоились, ничего не поделаешь. Ну и все.
Nobody knows exactly how many Lithuanians were sent to Stalin's notorious penal colonies, with some estimates of up to 250,000 people. Certainly, the KGB's own records show that by the time of Stalin's death in 1953, well over 100,000 Lithuanians had been banished to the Gulag camps. More than half never returned.
Дедушка сразу умер. И даже отец на Новый год, полгода пожил.
Это символы той власти коммунистической, зверской, такой, политической организации, геноцида, которая, зачем их держать?
Для меня это не нужно, я даже не была и не буду.
Antanas Telekis and Nick Lazaredes are both Siberian Gulag survivors, and their recollections of Soviet repression and brutality are crystal clear.
Хорошо. А когда начали вывозить людей в Сибирь, и самых бедных, чтобы богатые боялись, самых 3 семьи вывезли в Сибирь, и почти все там погибли, и тогда уже в моей душе так возникла такая ненависть к коммунизму.
Мне 10 месяцев держали в КГБ, в подвале, следствие шло, и статус сил 9 лет, лишения свободы, а суд оставил 6 лет.
After years of hardship in gulags, both Nick and Antanas returned home and, driven by contempt for the system, started working underground against the Soviet communist state. Even when the Soviet Empire collapsed in 1991, the transition to independence for Lithuania, the first of the Russian satellites to gain statehood, was marred by the violence of the retreating Russians. Nick and Antanas are deeply troubled about the commercialisation of the symbols and icons of a much-hated regime.
большая часть народа не хотела этого памятника, там все этих зверей, там Сталина, Ленина поставить. Но там зарабатывает только тот, который там, значит, создал этот.
In the capital Vilnius, the continuing anger over Soviet symbolism was recently raised a notch when authorities there declared that the city's last remaining Soviet sculptures adorning its well-known Green Bridge were protected items of cultural heritage. That provoked widespread anger, along with calls for vigilante-style direct action to destroy the bridge's sculptures, which experts consider to be prime examples of Soviet socialist realism.
Единственное, что мы сделали, то мы прикрепили специальные таблички информационные, где очень ясно и четко сказано всем желающим демонтировать эти скульптуры, что эти скульптуры являются культурным наследием и охраняются государством.
With little tolerance for mob action, Vilnius Deputy Mayor Romas Adamovicius says the city is determined to protect and preserve the Green Bridge sculptures, regardless of their tainted heritage. He says it's simply a matter of common sense.
Ни одно государство не берется сгоряча взять да уничтожать все, что связано с прошлым периодом. Культурные страны к истории относятся также культурно.
Some people had a fear, and maybe some still fear the coming back of old times.
One of Lithuania's most respected citizens has also been lending his voice to the debate. As a past chairman of the Supreme Council of Lithuania and as a member of the European Parliament, Vytautas Landsbergis campaigned unsuccessfully for an EU ban on all Nazi and Soviet symbols.
Why? What reason? We have to keep those symbols and idols of stupid and criminal ideology and our conquistors and executioners. We should be crazy. I think we are not crazy.
A sentiment shared by the Lithuanian survivors of Stalin's camps.
Народ в рабстве. Ну то как будем мы оковы целовать, да? И уважать. Зачем они нужны? В Германии, в Западе нигде, ежели Гитлер поставили памятник, что люди говорили, да? Но это
так Сталин
сравнить Сталин и Гитлер.
Два братья.
In Stalin World's souvenir shop, the ghosts of the Soviet Union are offered for sale in the form of vodka glasses, fridge magnets and dozens of other trinkets. And there's no shortage of eager customers. It's just one of the elements that's turned this unusual tourist venture into a real money spinner for Vilamaus Malinauskas. But while he's happy to tout its success, any suggestion that he's profiting at the expense of Stalin's victims draw an angry response.
Знаете, я такой идиотский вопрос услышал первый раз. Что вы думаете, что я должен всю жизнь где-то зарабатывать деньги и все это выдерживать?
For the communist theme park owner, Grūtas Park is a labour of love, and his vision is not yet complete.
Конечно, что это еще не конец, и он будет расти, и очень много есть планов, и все такое.
Although drawing in the tourists is the bottom line at his Stalinist sculpture park, Vilamaus also regards it as his legacy, ultimately planning, he says, to surrender it to the state as a gift to the people.
Людей, которые занимаются бизнесом, и я считаю, что каждый человек, который занимает чуть-чуть больше, зарабатывает чуть-чуть больше денег, он что-то должен оставить после себя для страны. Я думаю, что вот я оставлю этот парк для литовского народа.
И все проклинаем по сей день и до конца жизни будем проклинать, потому что он отобрал нам жизнь.
Fascinating. Nick Lazaredes filming and reporting. Is that a Back to the Future scenario or what? But what do you think? Is what we just saw commemoration or commercialisation? Give us your views on that or any of tonight's stories at sbs.com.au/dateline. Up next, the Muslim ban taking pot shots at stereotypes in both the West and their own religion.
I wanted a destabilized Islam. I wanted to walk into a mosque and have no imam telling me what a book said, what a prophet said.